What drives a 13-year-old boy to murder a 4-year-old? Were there any warning signs no one noticed? How could something like this even happen? Was that nurture or nature? Today, we're diving into the chilling case of Erik Smith, a young boy whose life will shock the world. We will explore, from a psychological perspective, all the reasons that led him or might have led him to commit this horrifying crime. Let's get into it. In 1993, in a small town in New York, 14-year-old Erik Smith committed a heinous act. He murdered 4-year-old Derek. Erik Smith encountered 4-year-old Derek while Derek was walking alone near a wooded area close to his home. Erik later admitted that he deliberately led Derek away from the road and into the woods where no one could see or hear them. Once there, Erik attacked him. He strangled Derek and struck him repeatedly with rocks. He also sexually assaulted Derek with a stick. If you're new here and you do not know who I am, my name is Anna. I'm a graduate psychology student. I work with veterans, and I am currently pursuing licensure to become a psychotherapist. In today's video, we will go over the reasoning behind the murder of the poor 4-year-old boy, Derek. Let me give you a little bit of background on Erik Smith. So he came from a troubled family. Initially, he lived with his mother, stepfather, and sister. However, the sister moved away at the age of only 16 because the stepdad actually molested her. And the mother did not do anything about it. The mother didn't care. The mother cared more about keeping her husband rather than her own daughter. We might be wondering if the stepdad abused Erik Smith in any way. We don't know. However, it may be possible. And Erik Smith was not a good student. He didn't have friends. He was bullied. And so all these things play a role in the reason behind why he decided to actually torture and murder a 4-year-old boy. Another thing to add is that the mother, during pregnancy, she took seizures medications, which are considered teratogens. And so that may have influenced the development of the brain of Erik Smith and may have led to some cognitive deficiencies. Okay, so let's start from a psychodynamic perspective. Erik Smith appears to be overwhelmed by uncontained anger and rage. His affect is so intense that he cannot control his id. The id, you may already know, stems from Sigmund Freud. He described the id as our reptilian brain, so our urges, our impulses, like basically what drives our survival, like eating and reproduction. Whereas the superego is the intellectual part of our brain in which we over-rationalize everything and we judge ourselves. The superego actually tries to restrain the id, restrain those natural impulses, whereas the ego is the in-between. So we can't be as perfect as the superego, but we can't also allow our urges and impulses to explode. And so the ego regulates the both. That in Erik Smith's case, his id was not contained. So Erik Smith appears to be overwhelmed by uncontained anger and rage. Also, one of the clearest defense mechanisms here is displacement. He redirected an impulse from its true target to a safer one, because probably the person he wanted to hurt was the stepfather. However, he was a child, so he didn't really have the means to hurt his stepfather. His stepfather was big and tall, and so he chose a target that for sure he was able to beat up. And the reason why I'm saying that his true target was the father is because he is a figure associated with abuse and power. And again, confronting him directly would have been impossible. And so instead, that rage was displaced from the stepfather to Derek, a non-threatening, vulnerable child. Another defense mechanism that we can see in Erik Smith is identification. Identification is when a child lacks the skills that are seen valuable in the world or in society. And so they may attempt to emulate the aggressor, especially if that aggressor seems powerful and unpunished. Because the stepdad, he admitted to have beat up Erik Smith, and the sister of Erik Smith stated that she was molested by his stepdad, but he received no punishment. The law did not get involved. Erik may also have used a passive into active defense. When someone has been a passive victim, one way to gain mastery over the trauma is to reenact it from an active role. So instead of being the helpless one, he becomes the one in control. And what is the symbolic meaning of the victim? So Derek was not just a victim. He had a symbolic value, likely saw himself in Derek. He may have seen the vulnerability, the helplessness, which reminded him of his own abuse. So destroying Derek may have represented an attempt to destroy the parts of himself tied to those memories. However, there is also jealousy. Derek symbolized everything Erik felt he lacked: a healthy, loving family, emotional safety, normal development, and also he was good at sports. That was something that it was mentioned in the documentary. Also, Erik had a speech impairment as a child, which may have further contributed to shame and feelings of defectiveness. Now, let's talk about the motive of Erik from a behavioral perspective. From a behavioral perspective, we focus less on unconscious drives and more on learning, reinforcement, and modeling. So the modeling of violence, of course, he saw his stepfather being violent with him, with his stepsister. So that was normal to him. He grew up seeing violence. Especially, he saw that violence is unpunished because the stepdad never had repercussion. Erik also appeared to enjoy the attention he received after the crime. Instead of displaying anxiety during the interviews, he seemed engaged. If you watch the documentary, you can see how the detective says that talking about the murder and answering the questions that they were asked, Erik Smith will actually lighten up. He will love talking to the detective, and he loved the fact that he was getting all the attention, which can suggest a history of social isolation, being ignored or rejected by peers, limited positive reinforcement. And attention, even if it's negative, can become reinforcing when a child feels invisible. Now let's move to the cognitive behavior formulation. So Erik demonstrated multiple distortions and deficits. He held deeply negative core beliefs like I am nothing, I am nobody, I am stupid, I am never going to be anybody. He also expressed a belief that there is no God, because when his grandma died, he felt like that there was no God. Why would God allow someone to die, someone good to die? He believed that bad things will happen to good people and that bad people do not get punished for what they do. So he believed that there was no God because of that. Now let's talk about the cognitive deficits. Erik struggled socially, academically, and athletically as well. And these deficits undermined his self-esteem and reinforced his negative self-schema. There were also signs of lack of empathy. He wasn't able to put himself in Derek's position, even though he probably had experienced something similar to Derek. Also, he had a limited ability to anticipate consequences because he didn't think that harming Derek would lead to him being incarcerated. Basically, Erik appeared to struggle with theory of mind, which is the ability to understand that other people have thoughts, feelings, and inner experiences separate from one's own. And this deficit is seen in conditions such as autism, where basically individuals may not fully grasp that others have independent mental states. And this does not excuse behavior, but it helps explain impaired moral reasoning. Now let's look at the murder from a family systems perspective. Erik's stepsister again reported abuse, stating that her mother did not care when the stepfather abused her and she just wanted to keep her husband. So this suggests parental failure to protect an unsafe home environment and a deeply unhealthy marriage. A biological vulnerability. Erik's mother took epilepsy medication during pregnancy, as I mentioned before, and he displayed minor physical anomalies: large ears, closed set eyes, lack of filtering, which is this part of the lip. And these anomalies can sometimes indicate genetic compromise, in utero exposure to toxins or prescription drugs. And such factors may affect brain development, learning, IQ. Why do I think that Erik might have been also sexually abused by his stepfather? Well, because of what he did to Derek. He took a stick and sexually abused him with that stick, which is odd for a 14-year-old to do unless they have experienced that. And the fact that he smashed the banana, like, why did he take it on the banana? It meant that probably he saw the banana as a phallic symbol, from the abuse that he experienced with the father. So now, even though Erik Smith had this horrible childhood and he was reenacting what he had experienced in his own life, and because he felt so powerless, he wanted to be in the position of the abuser rather than being the victim, and he knew that he couldn't do that with his stepfather. He took a small target or a weaker target because he was a 4-year-old child, and so reenacted that to the child. Now we can see from the tapes of the trial that he has a flat affect. He doesn't seem to show any remorse. He doesn't seem to understand the gravity of what he did to that boy. There was no tear shed. And so the question is, was he actually born with no empathy and no theory of mind? Or maybe the environment that he grew up in fostered that in him. The question is, would have he committed the same crime if he was born in a loving, caring, and safe family? Well, we will never know. Erik Smith went to prison for 21 years. He was released when he was 41 years old, and he has been released in 2021 or 2022. So we will never know if his life would have been different if he had a protective family. Now, will he commit another murder? If he's an actual psychopath, there is a high chance that he will continue to commit not necessarily murders, but crimes. If he is a sociopath, which means that his actions were motivated by the abuse that he experienced, then probably not, maybe not. Maybe he's just going to enjoy the rest of his life as the best of his abilities. We will never know. I guess just time will tell. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think in the comment section below.